you don't need to carry the hard seasons of your life because people care. And it's made me cry. It's amazing when you put something out there that hurts, who steps forward and who shares and who gathers around you. And I tell you this because our story would not be possible without literally thousands and thousands of people that came behind us and helped us.
Welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Rinaldi. This is a space to explore the full spectrum of grief, from the kind that comes with death to the kind that shows up in life's many transitions. Through stories and conversations, we remind each other that we're not alone. Your journey matters, and here we're figuring it out together. Let's dive right in to today's episode. Let's start with a quick disclaimer. This podcast includes personal stories and perspectives on topics like grief, health, and mental wellness. The views expressed by guests are their own and may reflect individual experiences that are not meant as medical advice. As the host, I hold space for diverse voices, but that does not mean I endorse every viewpoint shared. Please listen with care and take what resonates with you. Thanks for joining us today. Today I am chatting with Danny Lesslie, and he is a husband of his wife, Raffaella, who lived with stage 4 vulvar cancer for 5 years. And together they navigated that journey with a lot of courage and love and resilience. And after she died, Danny had fulfilled their dream of writing a book. So we will be talking about that. Danny is a father of 2, and I look forward to getting to learn more about you, Danny, and your story, and also get to meet Raffaella. Did I say when I was reading it, I probably did say it like Raffaella rather than Raffaella, how I know how to say it.
Yeah.
Just because when I'm reading in English, then my brain goes into that rather than my Spanish natural rolling of the R's. So welcome again, Danny.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here to share this story.
Thank you for reaching out. Yeah, it's that part of being able to not honor her legacy by you sharing as well, right? It feels very cathartic when you're not only for your own grief when you're sharing your grief story, but it's another way of keeping someone's memory alive too when you're sharing your story. Do you feel that way?
I do. And I was blessed in that we decided as a couple to share about our experience years and years before she passed. So it was very common for me to reach to sharing. And in the sharing, I started to feel the connection to her again. And that was huge because when someone passes, they're obviously not here anymore. So it was like I was building a bridge, each day when in my writing and in my sharing. And so it's really become a beautiful thing. And it's proof that love is bigger than death.
No, I love that. It's that continuation of that love just continues, regardless of what somebody believes in terms of what happens after we die.
Yeah.
That love in itself is something that can bind that memory and that union. So talking about love, take us into learning how you and Rafaela met and a little bit about your life together, meeting,
Okay.
and you're creating a family.
So we met in Los Angeles, on the West Coast of the U.S. I went out there to start a gym, and she was out there helping family, going to school. She was managing a barbecue restaurant at the time, and she came to one of our programs, and that was where we met. And right off the bat, something was different. There was something different about her, and this story I always tell, but she came up and we were in the course of conversation. I noticed that she in her car had a baby seat in the back seat. And at this time I was 29 or something around there. And so at that point in life, people have children. You meet people and they have families and stuff. So I was clearly interested in her. So I just, in the course of conversation, I just dropped in a line about the car seat, trying to figure out what was going on, right? Testing the waters. And she goes, "Oh, it's my daughter." And I guess what happened to me was visible. I guess I just like went flush or something, just looked like a ghost. And so she starts laughing. And her wit was so fast. And she got me. She got me so good. And then I started laughing because we realized what had happened. And that was when, from then on, I was like, man, I couldn't keep my heart off of her, my mind off of her. And it just, eventually we started dating, and then it was kids. And yeah, so it was then.
So she was what? It was not her daughter. It was a
No,
car seat because
I'm
of the
sorry.
family that
It
she would
was
help. That she
correct. She
would
was
help.
out there
She always
helping
said,
her family.
"Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
it was their daughter, and
yeah,
she would help out with her. And,
yeah, yeah." And so
but
she
she
did
got
it.
me good.
It is it like you could not keep a poker face then at that moment
Oh,
of
no.
oh,
Apparently, I thought I could,
okay.
but apparently I didn't, because she right away caught me. And she was just lightning fast with her wit. And and so we would joke with each other many times, and nothing would ever be said. It would be a glance or a look or a laugh or something, and we would start cracking up. And it was always that way through our whole relationship, even to the very, very end. Humor was like a safe home
Mm,
home to
a safe
to
haven, as they say.
yeah,
Yeah.
to carry us through the hard times, which we found.
And humor is in grief something that sometimes people don't realize that for a
Yeah.
lot of us, it is another huge tool that we can use in our grief journey in that moment as someone is being faced with death, but
It
also
is, yeah.
then after we ourselves are living our lives without them, humor also can end up
It is,
becoming a part.
after, it's very hard because there's so much sadness, and it's so thick all the time. And I remember the first time that like blinks of joy started to show up after, in this past year since she passed. And I didn't know what to think about it, because I felt guilty, because I would laugh at a joke or something. But then I would like feel an attachment to the sadness and feel like I was doing a disservice in finding joy. And then, so I really battled with that a lot. And I know that if there was one thing she would want of me and our girls, it's to be joyful. So for me, it's become a home base. Like, how do I get to joy every day? Because I've learned that just because you have joy doesn't mean you don't have sadness.
Exactly.
And
They're not
they can live side by side. And that's not pulling from the other one. And in fact, I think it's more honoring to find joy than it is to sit in sadness. And that's a hard truth, and it's been a hard journey to be a part of. But I believe it's true.
especially if what they represented was that joy and that spark and that wit,
Yeah,
right? It's like
and
you for you
she
and she
was.
was that, then you're like, I need to represent more of what this energy of joy is. And like you said, they go hand in hand. I don't know at what point in our lives when we were little or whatever that we just would think that we had to it was one thing or the other, right? It
Yeah,
that with that we couldn't feel sad and feel happy, or we were always people were always trying to fix, or, our parents might have always trying to fix how we were feeling in a moment rather
right.
than just honoring how we were feeling in that moment. And so we kind of compartmentalize the emotions as if they have to just have a certain order, or yeah, like they just, but I love that they can go hand in hand. It's not
Yeah,
one or the other.
I had
Yeah.
a really interesting moment when, so with the girls, our daughters, they're 8 and 10 right now, and we've really, like I said, we've really been trying to find joy. And there was one morning when we were driving to school, and my daughter put Michael Jackson on their CD or whatever, and we're in a neighborhood, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I got out and started to dance in the street, just to be stupid. And my daughters, they were both laughing, and one of them started crying because she was laughing so much. And I was like, oh, It's like sadness, like tears come out of us when we're sad. And also tears come out of us when we're joyful. And I was like, joy and sadness just embrace in tears. And it hit me. I was
Right.
like, there's something unifying in our tears. And because she was no doubt, like, it was funny, she was having a good time. It wasn't sadness. But I was like, that's really, really a beautiful thing.
It's so true because it's like how many times do you see even the little cartoons, with the laughing thing, but tears coming out of their eyes as they're laughing because it is so true.
Right.
Laughter does bring up, like when you're really like laughing, so belly laughing, tears are going to come out. Yeah. So it
For
is
sure.
very, I love the way they pointed that out. Okay. So you guys met. Tell us now into your marriage and starting a family. And how did you go from LA to then Texas, like that journey of your
Yeah.
life? And then we'll go into the diagnosis.
Okay. So, yeah. So we met, it was probably a year until we started dating. And then once we started dating, it was basically like, when are we having kids? There was no courtship really. There wasn't, it wasn't like, let's go out on our first date. We were so in step at that point that it was just, when's this going to happen? So we dated for about a year. We were engaged for about, I don't know, 10 months or something like that. And then when we got married, we were 3 months pregnant. So for all of you doing the math, it works out. We were engaged before we were pregnant. Like, don't be upset. But so we had our first daughter. So we got married in 2014. We still lived in Los Angeles. We had our first daughter in 15, had our second daughter in 16, left Los Angeles in 18. I sold my piece of the business. She made an exit on her teaching job and the barbecue restaurant. We left a giant community of people. We had spent a decade in Los Angeles, and it was very sad, but we didn't want to raise our babies there. So we had our two daughters. We In 2018 we sold everything we owned, our cars, everything, and bought an RV and drove for 40 days and traveled around and spent a week at the beach or a month at the beach, and traveled back and landed in Kansas. And that was a tremendous story. And there are stories and stories and stories in traveling. And we lived in an RV for a year. My parents have a property back in the Midwest. And then we ended up getting some alpacas while we lived in an RV, which is
Are you
crazy.
serious? Are you wait,
Yeah.
and so where did you put them? Like, I'm even
So
thinking of it's hard enough thinking of traveling. I think of this because you're saying like what would be my ideal like retirement. Like at one
is,
point, I'm like I
is
told
it,
my husband, it'd
yeah,
be so cool to just like drive around and then just see where it is
yeah.
that we like living and have two dogs. I can't imagine with two alpacas. you know.
Well, so we did it, and oh, I'm sorry, and it was just the kids and us, and then my parents lived on a property out there, and in our travels we had gone and stayed in an alpaca ranch, and so we had learned about alpacas, we had learned about Great Pyrenees, which are livestock guardian dogs, and the beauty and the harmony between them. So when we got to my parents' place, we smart decision, just decided to buy a pregnant alpaca, and then ended up with another one. So she had a baby. So then we had three. And then from there, I ended up getting a job managing a ranch. And so we went there. Our alpaca herd grew to 9. Um, we ended up with, ponies and a cow and all these different animals, and, managing a big ranch. And it was over the course of that time while we were in Kansas that Raffi started to become ill. She was working for a while, and she went through a bout with Crohn's, which is a terrible thing to deal with. Was able to heal herself of that, which is a testament to who she was and just an amazing human. And she had had PCOS when she was younger, and she had healed herself of that as well. So diet and lifestyle had done this twice. And then we got to this ranch place, and that was where the diagnosis happened. So when that diagnosis came about, this was in 2020. We, sold our alpaca herd. We had a coffee trailer business that we sold. We were just, we were literally ushering dreams out the door, for this new reality that was forced upon us. And it was a very sad and very scary time. If any of you have gone through a period of diagnosis with someone you love. It's just it's the worst. And So that was there. There was a lot of stories in there, but those are kind of the highlights of those years.
Wow. It's
It's a lot.
so much. Yeah, so much in such a short period of time. You guys lived so much life, so much,
Yeah,
really
we really
fully life,
did.
really
We really
lived
did.
it.
And it was we just there's the conversation of like burning the ships, and like
Mm.
we did that. We were in LA. We literally went from a full 2 bedroom apartment to a 36-foot RV with 2 kids, and then we drove back and lived in that RV for a year, and then to a 4-bedroom house, and then then I ended up getting fired from that job for no reason, and we had to get rid of that and back to another motorhome or a fifth wheel camper. And like our life was so jam packed. Every year there was huge events. Um, but she was home. I didn't care where I was or what I was doing. She was home.
Hi, I just had to come on and just kind of interrupt right now this episode that you're hearing. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you guys are listening to this conversation. And every single time I hear a guest, there's something new that I learn and something else that ends up showing up within me that I realize I still have to work on. And if by chance, as you're listening to this conversation, you're feeling the same, that there's parts of you that are being stirred up, and you are navigating a life transition right now that feels just heavy and stressful and just layered with grief, I want you to know that you do not have to do it alone. I invite you to connect with me for a free 15-minute discovery call, and we'll explore what's coming up for you and see if working together feels like the right fit. Just check the show notes below for my email and reach out for details. I'd really love to support you in integrating these transitions with more ease and clarity. Can't wait to hear back from you. Okay, let's keep on listening to the episode. Yeah, and even just within all those changes, there's also grief in each one of those stages. As you leave away, you left your
Yeah.
community in Los Angeles as you're building a new one. So when you got the diagnosis, you were still you were still in the ranch in Kansas, or had you already moved
Yeah.
to Texas?
No, we're in Kansas.
In
So
Kansas.
uh,
So you get her diagnosis, and then you mentioned how she decided to deal with her health with Crohn's and PCOS and PCOS. So how was that, when she was diagnosed, how was the approach of her healing then? And I do have a disclaimer at the beginning of this podcast that anything that people share here in terms of what they've chosen to do, like, it's not medical advice, these are everybody's
yeah,
stories,
that's yeah.
so it's just individual stories, so people can just do their own research. But what was your choice, or her choice, into how to navigate her journey with cancer at that moment?
Well, the journey started after a surgery. So she had a growth on her vulva, and we didn't know cancer was even a thing. And the doctor basically said, "Hey, you need to have this removed." She said, "Okay." And so we went into the surgery, and they said it's either going to be a vulvectomy or a radical vulvectomy, which neither one are good things. Radical is the more
Complete
aggressive
remove.
version.
Hmm.
And so, and that's all we knew. And so she goes into the surgery, and I'm sweating. And, if you've ever been in a waiting room, it's the worst thing ever. And they call me in after a few hours, and the doctor says, "Hey, she had the radical procedure. I believe I achieved clean lines, and the mass was cancerous." And so I had to tell her that that was what came of it, because she wasn't in the room. She was recovering.
Oh, so the doctor didn't tell her that
Well,
you were the one that knew first before she did?
yeah, so that was something that, that was, let's say that's 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I didn't tell Rafi until 8:30 that night. And so she had to wake up from surgery. I had to get her. We drove an hour home. Her family was at the house. It was like holding on to a bomb. And then I had to break the news to her, and that conversation is you don't want to have that conversation with someone, especially the one that you love. That was a really hard day.
I'm really surprised, though. I'm really surprised as the approach for even just the medical part that they didn't say, wait till she would wake up to then tell her, and
Well,
or
the
you
problem,
being.
yeah, it was, it probably took her an hour and a half to like wake up to like to where we could leave the hospital, and she was not with it.
Mm,
I mean, you couldn't even have a conversation with her until like 8:30 that night. So we're talking about like a 5 hour period.
yeah, and you're
It's
holding on to
it's
this truth and then having to share it.
granted, it's weird because I would want to be the one to deliver such news because I care, but also I didn't want to hold on to it because you don't want that. And it was really, it was a hard moment, and that everything really, kind of changed from there. So there was a lot of recovery during that period when we found out. So even though we knew this about her, there was nothing we could do because she had to recover from her surgery. So we just kind of sat with this for months, which was, I think, good and torture at the same time, because there's nothing you really can do, but also you're worried and you want to do something. So we started, integrative care and things like that, natural stuff like that. And it ended up that it recurred. She had a lymph node in her left inguinal crease, so like where your leg meets your torso, that fold right there. Um, she had a lymph node that was growing, and we were doing integrative care, all of these different therapies, and then that thing grew to the size of a grapefruit, and then burst through her skin. And so the doctor we were going to at the time was like, "Hey, you guys, this is an integrative oncologist." He was like, "You guys need to go like conventional, like bring out the big guns because we're losing to this thing, right? Our treatment path is losing to its growth." So it was then that we really had kind of a we're in a hard spot because that was the choice. She didn't want to do that. She wanted to approach it from an integrative perspective, in a much more, I would say, like health conscious, natural way. I was watching my wife suffer, and I was like, "No, we're not doing that. We're going to get chemotherapy, whatever we're gonna go do that." And that was one of the probably most important moments, I would say, in our marriage, is that we sat on the living room floor and we were diametrically opposed. We could not agree, and it was in that moment, however long that was, that I realized that it was much more important that I support her than I bring the solution to the thing. And so we both chose to lay down our swords and look at this thing from the same side of the table, and unify ourselves in our path. And ultimately, that looked like conventional treatment. But us doing it together was more important than me telling her what to do. And that was really a powerful thing in our marriage, and a thing that unified us, and I believe allowed us to make it through the next 3 or 4 years of struggle.
It's so hard in those moments because as someone is being faced with their own health challenges and
Right.
mortality, right? It's like you want to honor what they want to do, but at the same time, it's like I'm the one that's going to have to figure out how to live without you or whatever, right? Too, if by chance they choose differently. So it can be,
Yeah.
you have to also be detached from your own ideas to allow for the other person. But it's just, I love that you guys were able to compromise in a way that brought harmony into the way that you approached the treatment, because that would have been harder, right? Had you continued to be in opposite ways and views.
Yeah, she's already struggling enough.
Right.
physically and all mentally, emotionally, all the things. So to also be quarreling with me about what we should do is very silly. Um, and so I there was and it's interesting because there's a lot of chatter um, from people around you in these scenarios, and it's very hard to think from a place of unity, right? Because you're
Mm.
hearing you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, and all these different points of view, and um, you know, it. I finally had to come to terms with listen. This is her experience. This is her life. This is her choice. I am here to support her. Of course, I have an opinion. Of course, I have a viewpoint. Of course, I have a vote to cast. But I'm also not going to, puppet her through this. She's a very smart person. She's capable of choosing things, and I think that's a testament to a marriage that works is like we walk side by side. It's and so that's what we did.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that really hard juncture in your marriage, but that
Yeah.
ultimately flowed into then what became then this journey that you traveled together as she was going then through chemo and the traditional treatments then for her cancer. When did you guys decide to start journaling the process? And how was like the treatment? Like, yeah, yeah, let's go with that. When did you guys start deciding to journal your process?
So when excuse me, things started to after the surgery, when things started to kind of get out of control, when the other lymph node was growing, and we started to realize that we are currently in a ball game that we're not prepared for. We don't have the wherewithal to do this. We started to say, okay, well, let's share about what we're going through because our situation was very different from everyone else in our life. We had made a tremendous exit on our life. We had gone and done all these things, and so we had always kind of like sprinkled social media with what we were doing and been and writing about it. But then we decided to start writing in a more raw and authentic and an intimate way about what was going on. So it's probably I would say it was maybe 2020 2021, and that's when we started to talk about hey we should in sharing our experience we should bring both of our points of view to the table because her being she was very very headstrong, just a very deep thinker and very in touch with the earth and her emotions and all these things, and she had a very firm point of view on things, and it was bringing that to the table was important. She came from the birth world. She was a doula. She was a teacher. She was just a brilliant person in conversation. So her point of view is beautiful, and then I have a whole different point of view, and so we kind of started to write basically is what we did, and we both continued that all the way through our journey through certain times we would write certain things, and I wasn't writing to respond to her, she wasn't writing with me in mind, we were just writing about our experience, and that comes into play much later, but in the sharing there a real beauty started to show up out of that. People you don't need to carry the hard seasons of your life because people care, and it's a made me cry. It's amazing when you put something out there that hurts, who steps forward and who shares and who gathers around you. And I tell you this because our story would not be possible without literally thousands and thousands of people that came behind us and helped us. And I wouldn't have had 5 years to fight for her because she would have been dead the first time. We couldn't have done it. I mean, we didn't have the finances. We didn't have anything. And so that's that it all came from our willingness to share, and it wasn't it, there's enough pain, like you don't need to hold on to it. Like you can share and you'll still be sad. There's still pain. It's not, you don't need to carry it all. I mean, I couldn't do it. Um, so that was when a whole new experience opened up for us, was in the sharing.
And you built community then around this aspect then of your lives and had that support. Like you said, you
Yeah.
didn't have to
Cause
do it
man, you need
alone.
the support. I mean,
And
you
there's
need
so
it.
much vulnerability in that aspect of allowing people to support, but at the same time, there's so much strength in knowing that you are
Yeah.
willing to take help.
I mean, that was really hard. I remember the first time we, put up a GoFundMe, and we have done, I think, three or four. I don't even know anymore, but we were really struggling with asking for help because I want to solve the problem. It is it is very much like an ego thing. I want to solve it. I want to have the solution. I don't do well accepting that I don't have a solution. And she was the same way. She wanted to figure it out because she had figured out her health in the past. And we really had to work and, humble ourselves. And a friend of ours actually put it up for us because we we made it okay for ourselves to ask, but I didn't want to write it, and it was like a little bit of distance away from it. And we were in our kitchen. I'll never forget, it was the ranch, and we had to make decisions, like big ones. And she's in pain. She's, got a wound that's bleeding every day. I mean, we're in a bad way, very much. We don't have any answers. We financially, it's not possible. I'm physically exhausted because I'm working at a ranch. We have two little kids. Life is nuts. And this GoFundMe goes up, and I, you know, my wife was very, she didn't like technology. She didn't like to look at the time. She just was that person. She was in her own moment, and it was such a beautiful thing. And I flipped open my phone, and that GoFundMe had gone over $50,000, and that meant that we could make choices. That meant that we could go get treatment. That meant that we weren't dead. And I'll never forget, because she was a giver. She was like the quintessential mother. She was always trying to help you. She was always trying to do something for you or someone else. She was never thinking of self. But to watch her receive the love in that moment was like, I mean, because she had no choice. It it was just there. There was there's no choice. And that was how our story went. And it was laps around that same track. It was the admit you're not in control, ask for help, and God's grace shows up through a bunch of people. And the story is incredible. I mean, it's mind blowing.
Oh, wow. So this was 5 years of then that process? Or no, how many total? So the 2020, when was, I don't know her date. What is the date of her passing?
Last December, 12/12/24.
12/12/24. We're recording as we're recording this and still in 25. The when you then started then this treatment, so it was less than 5. So the less than 5 years, because it was all of, or I
Yeah, it
guess
was.
all of 2020, I guess, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it was right about 5 years.
Right about 5 years. So you start the treatment, you have the funds now because of this outpouring of love and
Mhm.
support. And how did you navigate informing the girls about this too? Because they were so young at that time. How did they play a part in the journey of you guys to going through this journey of cancer together?
Well, we were very much of the viewpoint that we were doing this as a family, and we weren't going to shield them from anything. We weren't going to hide anything from them. And so we referred to her situation as a bump. Mama has a bump. At this time, you're talking about a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So our biggest fear was that, you know, they would hear the word they would know the word cancer, and they would say it in a setting, and someone would react in a super negative way, and then that would inform their perception of what was happening to their mother. So we treated it as a bump. They knew she was sick. They knew. I mean, they see her. She's laying in bed all day. They know, but bringing all of the rest of that on board is something that a small child just doesn't need to deal with. They know she's ill, and so, but also they saw everything. Now they didn't see, the wound care and the blood and any of that stuff. She kept that hidden from them for 5 years, which is an amazing feat. But they knew they knew what was happening. They knew where she was. They saw her every day. So we just that was the way we went about it.
And at what point did the conversation, like at what point within the treatment of her treatment, did you guys already know that this was basically it? At what point did you stop chemo and just allow it to
Well,
happen? Or how was that process of already realization of that death was the next step,
there was
basically?
a lot. There was a lot. So we had the surgery in Kansas City. After the surgery, we went to a cancer treatment center in Tulsa, and she received 9 weeks of chemo and radiation. And that was that where that bump was, the big one on her left hip. That treatment was successful. That bump completely went away. She was going to have a major reconstructive surgery. Like they explained it, like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper was going to be cut away, and they were going to take skin from other places and replace it. And at that point, we were on board. We were going to do it. And then the cancer center closed. So then, we were waiting for the surgery. So they didn't do the surgery. So we then have to scramble around because she's got this, hole in her hip, that we need to repair. And we were going to do the surgery. I mean, we were on board with that whole thing, and it was going to happen in 30 days. And the cancer center closes. So then we traveled to Chicago to another sister cancer center, had a horrible experience there, ended up down
This
in Atlanta.
and this is still during the time. This is also right around the time of COVID, the pandemic
This
and
is in
stuff
COVID,
too.
yeah.
Is right.
Yeah.
So then that plays
Yeah,
a
COVID didn't
huge
exist. It didn't exist to us, really, other
right.
than I couldn't go to her doctor's appointments.
Right. No, but that's exactly it. So then that it could impact the type of service that you might have been receiving in some of the places, or the amount of people that were there, or things like that, or like even this cancer center closing or things like that, what could have been affected by that too,
I think the
or not
cancer center
necessarily
closed just due to the
other.
the state laws of Oklahoma, I think
Okay.
was
Okay.
part of the deal. But we ended up at the same company, Cancer Treatment Centers of America, in Atlanta. And Tulsa, great experience. Chicago, not a good experience. Atlanta, another great experience. There, we traveled back and forth from Atlanta for, I don't know, a year and a half. Had a couple small surgeries there. Had some immunotherapy there. Might have had some chemo there. I don't think we had radiation there. I think radiation was only one time. And then kind of came to a place where the immunotherapy wasn't working anymore, and it was coming back. Then I can't remember how all these things happened, but I was fired from the ranch. So we lost our house and job in one day. Um, the next the next day, basically, someone gave us a fifth wheel camper to live in. Two kids, two dogs, me and Raf. Someone gave us an RV spot on their property to live. I mean, the things that happened were just beyond comprehension.
Miracles. Yeah, miracles. Little
I mean,
miracles. Yeah,
they
miracles.
are. And
Yeah.
so then we end up in Atlanta, kind of run out of options there. Um, I end up getting fired from another job for no reason again. And then eventually we ended up in Scottsdale at another cancer treatment center because she was having another another flare up. I would say over the course of the 4 to 5 years, there was 3 to 4, like I would maybe call them like a tumor surge, and then there was the attack, right? There was the treatment we would pursue. When and it just kind of like kept moving. The general area was, I would tell you, if you were sitting on a saddle, all the areas that were touching the saddle are the areas that were tumors. So, for a mother, a female, the worst place. Like, I don't know that there could be a worse place. Um, so we end up in Scottsdale. We at this point we've three GoFundmes. We've been drained of money. We've lost houses. We lost like we have nothing really. And they tell us, well, it's going to be basically, it's going to be a couple $100,000 for 14 weeks of treatment, but we can treat you. Like, okay, like we're just have that just sitting in our bank account or something, because we didn't. They they say, well, if you want to do this, we need you to do a blood test today, and it's $2,000. That basically was like, we can pay you for the blood test, but then we can't pay our rent, and then we can't eat, type of deal. Like, yes, we can give you the money, but and so we agreed, because that was our only move. We were going to do it. And I promise you, we went home freaking out. And I'm telling you, my wife can't sit. Okay. She can't sit because of the tumors. She can't lay on her back. She can't walk. She can't sit. Hasn't been able to sit for 6 months. Flew to Scottsdale from Kansas City, hours on a plane, flew back home. She can't, so she would have to like rock down on her back and put her feet up on the chair in front of her just to get, I mean, it was an act of God that we were able to get there. And then we get there, and this is what the conversation is. And they were willing to help. It was just the way that it works there is that you pay cash. So we go home, we go through this whole thing again of like, swallow your ego, ask for help. We ask for help, another GoFundMe. 10 days later, we're driving back to Scottsdale with that money in a bank account. And it's a God thing. Like, I claim no responsibility. I
That
just
is
watched it
amazing.
happen. And this happened so many times in our story. And then we went to Scottsdale, had treatment there for 4 months. We lived there as a family for 4 months. And then we go back to Kansas City. The house wasn't the vibe in the house. She laid there for 2 years thinking she was going to pass away. So she's like, I don't want to be there. That was when we came to Texas. And that was the last leg of our pursuing treatment. And we ultimately lost her here. The story, like, there's so much. There's so much.
There is so much, and so much. It's still so fresh. Hasn't even
It's very
been
fresh.
a year as we're talking about this. And as like even just recounting each of the chapters in your life in this journey ends up being part of your process as well of grief in that process as you're sharing each one again and kind of like reliving it and kind of chronicling everything that
Yeah,
occurred. So thank you for doing that. And as the
of course.
listeners are hearing this, if you're right now in that type of situation, you know, this can be sometimes hard to hear, but at the same time, this is, a reality that can occur. And I think that if anything we've learned in this conversation up to now is the asking for help or be willing to be helped so that you're able to allow the miracles to kind of flow. And in this case, you were able to, pursue treatment and have her be with you guys longer than you would have had you not asked for help. So now let's go into your grief tools after, or if you want to take into even just the moments of her death. Were you all present, and what were her desires and wishes around about dying?
We were here. It was in this house that that she passed, and we were all there together. The girls were there. We were all there. Her family was there. My family was here. Um, just just there's nothing you can do, and it's so hard. Um, but we didn't hide it from anybody. Our kids were there the whole time. There are so many, stories of just heartbreak inside of that. But who was I to shield them from time with their mother? You know, um, I don't regret any of the time that we spent together. It's at all. Um, but I think the best thing we ever did was do it all together. And admittedly, I don't have the answers for my kids, and I didn't have them for them. But what I found out is that our kids are much more in tune than we are at many times. As adults, we're the ones that have to peel away the layers. The kids, man, they know it. I mean, one of our daughters drew a picture at my parents' house sometime within the last year of Rafi's life. I don't know when it was. Much before we knew that she was going to pass. And my mom didn't think anything of it. And it was just sitting there at her house. And it said, "Welcome to heaven, 2024."
Chills.
And I, no one knew. I didn't, no one knew. I mean, so we got to give our kids credit because, I mean, it's, it's insane that the connection of those kiddos. Um,
Yes.
it was only
No,
after everything happened and my mom was like sorting through things and she was like, "I found this picture your daughter drew, and do you want to see it?" And that's what it says. It's in my room.
that's
Um,
beautiful. As you're sharing, you shared that Rafi was also a doula,
she was, yeah.
and something that I've heard in an example in that part of dying is that just like as a doula, like being there present and helping ushering somebody into this world, there's also this ushering, right? There's death doulas as well, right? There's birth doulas and
Right.
there's death doulas of ushering people as they're exiting this world, but entering another one, right? So whatever that may be and whatever connotation someone may have. So it seems like your daughter already had that very much in tune that she was going to be entering another one and
Is
had
wild.
that is just beautiful. So after her passing, then what were some of the tools that you used? You used writing, continued writing. It's been less
Yeah.
than a year again since her passing, and now you have the book already written. So take us into that journey of your process of grief.
Um, I didn't know what to do. Your life explodes, and there's just nothing. I didn't know what to do, and our kids began because we homeschooled them, so they began going to school 3 weeks after she passed, or about a month after she passed. So that whole ushering them into school thing, she was a teacher by trade. Like that was her ball game, not mine. I couldn't even speak to the teachers. I was just in tears the whole time. So then the kids go to school, and I have all this open time, because the last months of her life were very logistical with, wound care and all the stuff you're doing, and it's okay. I'm happy to do it, but it's logistics, right? It's constant attention to detail. Well, when she was gone, there's this huge void of time, and then the kids are in school, so that's even worse and even more profound. And so I just kind of curled up on the couch and watched movies. I didn't know what to do with myself. Um, Eventually, I started to write because I knew that writing was a safe space for me and a way to just take the storm that was inside and just let it leave. Not for any purpose, just to let it leave. It was during that time that I remembered that we had wanted to write a book, because we had spoken about writing a book in like 2021. We had just never gotten to it because of our life, obviously. And so I started to think about how I could write the book that we wanted to write, because I didn't want to write another book. I wanted to write that book because that was what we wanted to do. And when your person dies, all the stuff you were looking forward to with them is gone. It just goes away, and that's so hard to deal with that you just it's like a forever timeline just over, but you're still here, and it's like, well, it's very confusing.
Yeah,
So
because
it
it's not
allowed me
only
to
the yeah, it's not only losing the person, but it's losing your hopes,
like
your
your
dreams, your
hopes.
desires,
Yeah,
your identity, everything. It's just so
yeah,
many layers of grief in that moment that yeah, it's compiled into all yes.
yeah. So it allowed me to like reach back and do this thing. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we had been writing for years, and I knew that she had written. I just didn't really know what. So I went back and was looking at her writings. So what I did was is I took the majority of those, and I put them into a timeline. And what you have was a very sparsely told story, a very focused, raw, intimate expressions of what she was going through. And the only reason I knew it was a story was because I was there, and I could fill in the gaps in my head. So I went to my writings and put the same sort of writings from me into the same timeline. So then you have a much fuller story, still missing parts. It's like a patchwork quilt that has a bunch of patches missing. And then I went through as a narrator, present day, and kind of wove them together, added a patch here, added a patch there. And then there were these moments, these undeniable moments, like the Scottsdale moment. There's probably 50 of them. And we started to call them Jesus moments throughout our story, where it was like we had no hope. It was over. And then all of a sudden, it was like, if this is our frame of reference, a solution appeared out of nowhere. And there was these Jesus moments, and they were just mind blowing. And there's so many of them. So I put those in there. And then my pastor, is a good friend of mine, gave me a Bible verse for each one of those. So in the end, what you have is you have a story that is told from three perspectives. It's told from, or in three voices. I take that back. It's told from Rafi's voice. These are her original unedited words. There are spelling errors, grammatical errors. They're all there. Rafi's voice, my voice, and then God's voice tell one story. And I don't ever say he said, she said. You've got my text is in normal font, her text is in bold, and the Jesus moments are in shaded background. So you just read the story as one. You can see when the voices change, and it's very obvious. But it's this multi-dimensional look at this story that is remarkable. And there are a lot of people, a ton of people that knew her in her life, and they would all say she's remarkable. She's one of one. And none of them knew this stuff. And this stuff makes it is just like she's an unbelievable human, and there's just no way that this story happens and it's not told. It's like there's no freaking way. So most of it, is this in the moment raw, these writings, and I'm, as a writer, your ability to recall something in the past, there's a zoom out that happens. You're not able to give it the teeth that it has when you're in the moment. You're not able to give it the gripping words, the emotional, words that you are when it's happening. And so most of this book is that way. It's in the moment, and it's raw, and it's unfiltered, and it's it just gets you. And so it's very, very unique, but it very much is, you know, the best way I could recreate um this goal that we had in our life. So and that was, she passed in December, and I was holding the book in August. And that's wild. I mean, that was really a crazy moment. And it still is. I mean, it still
It,
is
it,
a crazy thing.
yeah, you were able to birth this together. This is the new baby you guys now have together is this book, because it is both of your stories and then God within it as well.
It is.
And then you birth it. Let's see, 9 months later. There you go. December, 9 months.
That's funny. I didn't think about that.
Well,
It's very funny. It's very funny.
um, so I want to ask you the why the title. Thank you, cancer. Why did you choose to have it be a thank you, cancer, rather than what most people up out there say about cancer, which is starts with an F and then you? So let's go. Let's
Well,
go in the why it's thank you,
so
cancer.
a couple things. So if you can see this, there's a comma right there.
Uh-huh.
And as a
Thank you.
writer, that means something, right?
Okay, got it.
Um,
Thank you. And then cancer.
and
Okay.
I I I would love to tell you, but I could not create a worthy context around telling you in a conversation. It is in the book,
Okay.
and there's a very good reason for the title.
Okay.
But I would do an injustice to answering that question if you didn't have the context of the book.
Of the book. Yeah. And I did not read it prior to us
No, it's
talking
okay.
because you booked it.
But
So
I've not answered anyone that question.
that question. So it's like that gives
It
us
is it is a
as
very
the list.
it's a very important it first of all, it's a very polarizing title. I'm aware
Mhm.
of that. Actually, I was sitting in church the other day and I had a book with me to give to someone, and someone behind me was like, "What is that book?" And then the conversation happened, and they had cancer in their experience, and um, there's a very good reason for it, and I'm very proud to honor the conversation that comes from that.
From it. And we would find out when we read it as the why
Yes.
it is that it is. So, Danny, please share with us how people can get the book. And then I have a last question for you before we close off. So, how can people get the book and also get in touch with you?
Yep. So the book is, if you're in the US, there's a link. I will send you the book. So the way that the publisher works is they send all the books to me, and I personalize them and send them to you. So if you're in the US, there's a Blue Hat Publishing link, and I'll send that to you, and you can put it in the show notes or something. It's
Perfect.
also like on my Instagram profile. You can find it. If you're abroad, meaning outside the United States, you can find it on Amazon.
Perfect. Perfect.
So,
So
yeah.
and easy, and they can find it either looking for your name or the title of the book. Thank you, comma,
Yes.
cancer,
Yep.
or Danny Leslie. And then Raffaella's name on it as well. And Raffaella.
Raffaella Dobles. Yeah.
Raffaella Dobles as well.
Raffaella.
So
Yeah.
Danny
Yes.
Lesslie and Raffaella Dobles as authors. So, Danny, I always like to ask my guests if there's something I have not asked you that you want to make sure you share with the listeners regarding either your story or about grief.
I think the most profound thing is I can't even say it. You're not alone, and man, it feels like you're alone all the time, but you're not. And I've been fortunate enough to, because of my willingness to share, I realized that, and I realized that over and over and over again. And it's uncanny on the hardest days that I have. I swear this is how Raph takes care of me. I get inundated with messages from people like that read the book, that whatever. And today was one of those days. Today's a hard day, and there's no handles on grief. You don't control them. But I will tell you that the messages that I receive are very pointed, and you're just not alone. And people do care. My goodness, people care and they want to help. And but they don't know if you're struggling and you don't share, no one knows. And I'm the guy, like, I will be going through the worst day of my life and I'll smile at you. And and I'll also tell you if you ask me. But it's in the sharing, there's come so much beauty in this dark season, and I couldn't imagine going back and trying to carry all of this without sharing about it or the support that just shows up. I couldn't imagine it.
Thank you, Danny. And that's the reason of this podcast as well, because it is another way of people to know that they are not alone in their grief journey as they are listening to these stories that they can relate in their own lives. And so I appreciate you being here. I'm grateful that you're here and sharing this very raw and real, still very fresh grief. Grief does not end, it shifts, but right now it's still
Yeah,
very fresh grief. And I think that it's important for people to hear that fresh and rawness of grief as well, because some of the ones that are listening are exactly in that
yeah,
space in their life. And a lot of times they don't allow themselves to share with others that they're not feeling okay and receive that love and that support from others. So thank you for those
of course,
words. And thank you for sharing your story, Rafaela's story, the
of
girl's
course.
story, the alpaca story. There could still be an alpaca farm still again in your future, maybe one day.
There
And
might
then
be, yeah,
you could continue that legacy of what you guys had started and then stopped because of just life circumstances
yeah.
at that moment. So you never know where your story unfolds. And I would
That's right.
love to be able to have you some years down the line to share where your story has unfolded then too. So please come back and share your
That would
journey
be an
with
honor.
us as
Yeah.
well. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.